Thank you, everybody. Today, I will be talking about a number of things that I love, and so I'm excited to share them with you. First, has anybody actually been to this exact monument before? Anybody been here? No? Any guesses where it might be? One hint is where the pillar is where it is on the map. Any guesses? It's as close to Knoll Island as you can get while still being on some land. I guess we could have gone over to the shore there, but last year at NACIS, I brought my lovely wife with me because it was the first stop on our honeymoon, and our honeymoon ended up going out to Sao Tome and Principe, which are some islands in the Gulf of Guinea that are the closest places that you can get to Knoll Island. So we had to have a geography joke, buried in there. This year, brought her again because tomorrow's her birthday, and so I would just like to thank NACIS for continuing to troll our relationship. We'll see what it has for us next year, but happy birthday, Payne. So a little bit about me. I'm here to share some of the things that I've learned about flying and airstrips and maps. My experience in getting into this community has been primarily around the work I've been doing in aviation. I started a nonprofit called Barbless, which I'll talk about in a second. And my background is in a number of different areas, most notably the free software community, where I've done a lot of work supporting a variety of different projects. Mozilla, I spent a lot of time with them. Cloud infrastructure, where I started a couple cloud infrastructure companies, did my old stint in the Bay Area. Aviation, where I'm a pilot, mainly focused on backcountry aviation and the mapping work that we'll be talking about today. And more recently, consciousness. In early 2023, Oregon legalized psilocybin for therapeutic use, and I ended up being the first licensed facilitator. So not only am I a flight instructor, I can instruct you in other sorts of flights as well. Barbless is, as Pat mentioned, a nonprofit dedicated to collecting and delivering mapping products by tasking the volunteer aviation community. In the aviation world, there's a number of these nonprofits that do volunteer flying, and the most notable one is one called Angel Flight West. Angel Flight serves for medical transportation, and so let's just say you are a family member is diagnosed with cancer. Hopefully that's not the case for anybody here, but if it happens and you live in a medical desert, Angel Flight will support you by pairing you with volunteer pilots that might fly you to your chemo treatment weekly. So, an example of where I live in Central Oregon, often people are getting their treatments done in Seattle. And so there's a nonprofit that will, for free, match you with pilots who will fly you for free to your medical appointments. And it's not just cancer, any sort of medical treatment that's ambulatory. And so you can think of Barbless as this volunteer aviation community, but oriented more towards gathering and producing data for the aviation world. And so our board members are Mary, who's the incoming director of Angel Flight, and then Lane, who is heads up technology for humanitarian OpenStreetMap. And I think they're both very representative to the two sides of what this nonprofit is all about. This is one of the airplanes. We call this airplane Snoopy because it looks kind of like Snoopy's little bird. It's also kind of got that World War II look. It came to us when we found it in a container with its wings taken off, and it was planning to go to Africa to look for wildlife poachers. And what's unique about this airplane is it's outfitted with some sensors. It has about $250,000 worth of cameras attached to it that can do nadar imaging, near-infrared thermal camera, as well as a gimbaled camera that can do infrared as well. And so it's this kind of little flying machine. It looks like a little general aviation airplane, but it also has kind of these really sophisticated sensors attached to the bottom of it. The cameras are actually owned by Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and then we have the airplane that we're attaching it to. And so it's kind of an example of how those two things come together. You can see the little gimbaled camera popped out in the bottom there. That's that little black ball. It actually articulates down and comes out. I was doing research on what these things were originally built for. And here's what the cameras look like, the actual sensors that are in that little pod down there. So all that's built in. And when I was doing research on the gimbal, I found this off the marketing website of the vendor. It says, Target remains locked. I'm like, Target? Uh-oh. I think that's a car. But yeah, I don't know what these are attached to drones normally, I believe. But in this case, because it was outfitted for wildlife poaching, they're used to track people looking for wildlife poaching. We've since provisioned, kind of reused this equipment to capture aerial imaging, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I have a little video. Let's see if it works with the Wi-Fi. I have to cut over. Okay, so this is somebody sitting in the back seat of the airplane. I'm up there flying it, and we're essentially laying down aerial imaging work, and this is where he's playing with the video camera. Oh, is there a cow down there or something? And this, you can see the red, that's what we've painted with the camera. So as we're flying over, it sort of in real time shows what we've captured below us. And you can see the airplane, with GPS that's where it's currently at. So this is just sort of a little demo flight of how this stuff works. And we were out practicing collecting some things. For the passengers, it can be a little bit tricky because you're looking at a screen, which might not make you feel so good. And then we have to do these really steep turns and banks in it in order to make the patterns tight enough to get the high resolution imagery we need. So it takes a special co-pilot to want to sit in the back there. But okay, so that's that whole area of sort of the more volunteer flying side of things. Unidrome, which was the topic of the talk today, is where we're more producing data for the aviation community. Last year at NACIS, I spoke about how we were producing maps for Baja and Mexico. And we essentially took that process that we were doing and then applied it to the whole world. So we're like, could we map all these tiny little airports that are all over the place? And so the reason why we're doing this is, first, there just is not a reliable source of information of airports all over the world beyond the big airports. There's probably 1,000 big airports in the world, but there's around 60,000 airports total. And so there's just a lot of stuff out there that isn't on the map. These airports can be really important for humanitarian relief projects, and that's why HOT has been interested in it. And they're also, for pilots, it's just really interesting in emergencies. If you just know where everything is, it's really helpful, regardless of if you can actually land there or not. Because under aviation, if you're under duress, you can land wherever you need to, and you won't be violating any rules. And so the Unidrome project is, to essentially map every known thing, and then right now we're sticking it all in OpenStreetMap, just so there's one place that has a canonical source of everything. And it's also been this case study in how do we do interoperability between cloud-native data sets. We published this on GitHub. Right now, it currently pulls in data sets from the FAA, from our airports, which is a public domain data source, pulls in the existing OpenStreetMap, both through Daylight and the Overpass API, and we pull in the Wikipedia/Wikidata data. And then everything is saved into CSV files, which are checked into the repository along with the scripts that were able to do it. So then everything is revisioned. We found a lot of the problem in this space is just tracking all the changes and things that are going on. Because airports, well, it's a decent amount of data. It's not a whole ton of data, so we can't just check it all into Git, and it's all this in there revisioned for you. And then there are scripts that then manipulate that data, and they are revisioned against the data itself, too. So essentially, if it's in the repo, it should work with the data that's in there, because they're all just in lockstep together at all time. So example of some of the things we can do in the Unidrome right now are sync all these data sources, which in and of itself has proved just really handy. Just being able to run a little script and be like, okay, give me everything that's in OpenStreetMap right now and give me a diff of how that's changed just because we're using regular version control. Super handy. I was talking to the Natural Earth folks earlier today, and they're like, oh yeah, send me those links because it's just hard to find that list of data somewhere. And then we have some tools that will detect, do some basic conflation in order to detect what is missing between the different data sets. So, what do we have over here, and then what do we have in these other things? We have tools to generate content packs for ForeFlight. ForeFlight is the tool that aviators use in the cockpit in order to fly with this stuff. So it gives us some libraries to produce things that are native in the format that we can actually fly with our iPad. One of my favorites, which I'll show a little screenshot of in a second, is just detect airports that have grass airstrips, but also have gas at them. And so, if you're flying an airplane with big tires, you want to land on the dirt, not on the asphalt, and you want to get your fuel. And then we've also been playing with some AI-based code generation, so that with the idea being that, could we just throw arbitrary CSV files from all of these different sources into it and have it code gen, adding that data into the conflation that we're already running. So just some examples of the sort of things we're looking for. This one's relatively easy. This is an airport in Mexico. It's asphalt, it's public access, it's publicly owned, and it's licensed, no big deal. This is where it starts to get a little bit trickier. So this is in Mulegé. Everybody see the airport there? It's this thing there. In this case, it's public access, private ownership, and it is a licensed airport that we can go to. This is one that I like. You see the airport there? It looks like an arroyo. Got it. Now we just land on this portion here. That's the new airstrip. In this case, it's not licensed. And one of the things I've been talking to the OpenStreetMap community about is how do we get all this data into there, and OpenStreetMap being OpenStreetMap, it's sort of all over the place. But what I did take away from my discussions with the OpenStreetMap community is that any infrastructure can go in OSM. So that's really handy because other data sets might only want the big airports or international airports or something. Where in OSM, if there's an airport there and we can see it, let's stick it in there, which is very in line with the goals that we're trying to do. So what have we found? This is sort of the known airport so far. It's about 60,000 globally. Some trivia for you. How many known landing strips are there out in the world? Now you know. The natural Earth data set is again, these either regional or like international ones. So just trying to show the difference between what's out there versus what's kind of regularly mapped. Just taking the airports that are missing from OSM, from kind of the popular other data source, we have about 8,000. Estimate about 4,000 of those are actually valid. Like if we went into the aerial imaging or actually went to the location to go and find them, we'd probably weed out a bunch of things that are kind of in the data. Some other people that are doing interesting things with this. Recently there was a group, MSF, I was working with HOT, and they physically use MapSwipe, which is a humanitarian OpenStreetMap project, to just look through imaging, looking for airports. And so we used our conflation software to see how we overlapped. They actually did a pretty good job with people manually reviewing, but it was just a much more labor-intensive thing to need to look at every single tile. They looked at a whole province, and they found, I think, about 8. I found one additional one for them. That one looked like this. You see the airport there. It's the telltale sign that this isn't actually an airport is that white square at the bottom. This thing. That's the threshold of the runway, and it looks like it's going up into the town to the northwest. Who knows if it's still active? It looks like they might have started some construction in the middle there, but. So this is just another script in the repository that shows you how to do some basic inflation. It's all in Python, so it can all be revisioned. And I just found a lot of problems with putting all these things in like PostGIS, and then your database gets out of control, and it's hard to keep track of where you're at in any current state. By putting everything in Git, it's just super consistent. This is another project the New York Times worked on, and maybe some folks here would actually have contributed to in some way. They were looking for illegal airstrips in Brazil. And they did an AI-based conflation where they're actually AI-based detection. They were looking for airstrips just in aerial imaging. They found a lot. They found 362 in the Amazon that they thought were illegal and contributing to illegal mining. This is the other little script I was talking about where my gas and grass thing comes in. So, example, this airport on the right is the FAA, that asphalt strip, which is 34, where it says 34. That would be in the FAA, but the grass strip to the left of it would not be published by the FAA. So that'd be an example of something where the data is in OpenStreetMap, but it's not actually even published by the FAA because it's not an official airstrip, but it's still maintained by the airport. And so you have these scenarios where you sort of need both data sets in order to give you a complete picture. And even FAA's data isn't complete at all times because there's little things going on at the airports that you might not know. On the collecting data side of things, this is a little sensor that we've been building. The camera kit that's on the bottom of Snoopy there was, like I said, about $250,000, which was donated to humanitarian OpenStreetMap. This is an alternative that we've been prototyping using Raspberry Pis and trying to keep the whole kit under about $1,000 with the idea that we could strap these to more and more airplanes to gather just basic NADAR imaging and obliques so that we could build orthophotos as well as elevation capture elevation data. Humanitarian OpenStreetMap is working on their drone version of this so they can arm locals in their different communities to collect this data as well. But airplanes are useful for kind of much wider areas than you could cover with a drone. And so this is kind of area research. We're flying our first mission, hopefully with these cameras. We'll see how far we get sometime in the end of November, kind of early December here, where we're going out to Dominica and St. Lucia. The plan is to fly that little yellow airplane, but that's like the equivalent of riding a dirt bike across the United States. So, I'm sort of like thinking about my back and not sure if I'm going to be able to pull that off. But that's the plan, is to fly it out there kind of near the end of the year and capture some imagery for a World Bank project that the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap folks are doing. And I'll end on this little story here. This is another example. This is up in Alaska, captured this aerial imaging data. I actually did this with a drone, and this is the drone. So I flew an airplane into it, but then deployed the drone to go and capture it. So this is kind of funny because you can see the airplane is there, and there's that hut behind it, right? And there's the airplane with the hut behind it, with the drone up in the sky. So it's kind of two angles on the same photo here. But this it was significant about this photo, not only it was beautiful, it was the day before I crashed this airplane. And so I previously last year didn't really want to talk about this because I was still quite embarrassed. Well, it's been a year now, so I feel like I could share a bit about it. But also, I had my mapping drone with me when I was doing this, so I was able to map my field. It's a little bit tricky to build an ortho photo of a sandy field like this, but you can see the tracks of the airplane coming down and then kind of the airplane bending. What happened here was I was on departure, taking off of a beach up in a remote Alaska, and I hit a tiniest little log, and it really ruined my day. The log, you could actually see it here. If you look at the very bottom of the photo, you can see how deep the sand is. It's barely anything. Like, it's probably about this deep, which is no problem for the airplane. And then you see in the middle track there's that piece of log. And then you see the front wheel get really wide until it side-loaded and snapped off. And so it was a very abrupt stop out there in the middle of nowhere. The airplane actually just flew back from Alaska yesterday, and this was June of last year. So it took that long to get the engine fixed and all the things that were a fallout of all this. But it's back and flying again. And you might be wondering, how does one get an airplane off of a beach in Alaska once you've broken the engine and ripped the nose gear off? And I will show you that video in a minute. But first, I also wanted to show you, notice all these tracks around the airplane, all those little dots. There's some people walking up, but there's also those tracks. Those are some bear tracks that came and played us a visit. Okay, and my last little thing is this video. We'll see if this one loads now. Okay, so there's the beach I landed on. I have my drone with me, useful. And that's a Black Hawk helicopter. That has been reprovisioned for salvage and rescue. And that is a first vertical takeoff you'll ever see of that airplane. Hopefully the last. And off into the sunset it goes. Okay. All right. So that's it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I love all things aviation. I love what you guys are doing. I was curious, looking for these landing strip airfields, have you guys considered talking to local county, well, at least in the U.S., local county emergency planners who possibly know privately owned airstrips like some of the are that could be mapped and added and are designated as emergency landing areas, but aren't necessarily recognized by the FAA? You know how possible with them and trying to add those, or those outside?
I would love to have all that added. It's just we're kind of going from the most macro to the more and more micro in terms of the regions. Just to add, for instance, Costa Rica's whole data set from their country is its own whole tedious thing. So then to go to every single county gets even more and more refined of tediousness. And there's a lot of data that's just not in there already that's obviously available. It just hasn't been kind of conflated into the general data set yet. So over time, yes, would definitely love to do that. Right now, we're kind of just going for the low-hanging fruit.
Okay. Just sort of a quick follow-up to that. have you thought about using imagery collected by like CAP? I know it's normally post-disaster imagery, but sometimes it exposes airplanes. So have you thought about using the imagery collected by other industries and other entities, and then going through and investigating those?
Do you mean like Civil Air Patrol?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by CAP? Yeah. Haven't worked specifically with them. Definitely open to it. In this case, in the our mission in November is the World Bank funded capturing new imagery for Dominica, and if CAP wanted to fly that mission too, I mean, I'd be open to talking to them about it. So it's just they're specifically looking for a specific thing, but yeah. Yep.
I got some family that are pilots. I just wondering where I should send them to get access to all these ships.
Yeah, our website is barbless.ngo. Yep. Cool. Anything else? All right, thank you.